The first chord we're going to learn is an A major chord. This is a great one to start with because it's nice and easy, and it lets us get used to a couple of concepts that are probably important for us to keep in mind as we progress and learn other chords in the future. To play an A major chord, we're going to start by putting our first finger in the second fret on the D string. Then we're going to put our second finger in the second fret on the G string, directly below the first finger. Then we're going to put our third finger in the second fret on the B string, directly below the other two that we've already got there. Then we're going to push nice and hard and strum from the A string only. We're not going to play the low E string, the A string down. That's because this is an A-type chord, so we want to play from the A string. That's a useful hack to remember which ones we need to strum. Another useful little thing to keep in mind is we're strumming from the string that is above the first finger that we're playing. So our first finger is the first finger that's doing something here, and we're going to strum from the A string because it's the open string above that. That's another little memory hook that we might find helpful if we forget which strings we want to play. So we talked earlier about the 3 tips for a good sounding chord. They were pushing hard, which we want to make sure we're doing here. They were using the tips of our fingers, which again, we want to make sure we're doing here so we don't mute that high E string. We've got to use the tips of our fingers so that comes through. But the third tip for a good sounding chord, fretting position, that's not something we can really do here. There's no way we're going to be able to get these 3 fingers like directly above each other in good, it's not going to work. So sometimes we actually have to compensate. If we're playing a chord that requires us to put 3 fingers in 1 fret like this, squash them up, we can't always have good fretting position for each of those fingers. But if we know good fretting position is important, then we're able to keep in mind that we're going to have to compensate and maybe push a little bit harder with that first finger as it's further back in the fret in order to get a clear sound. Some people find that it's easier to play the A chord like this. They switch up the first finger and the second finger. It doesn't actually matter which way you play it. Both are correct and both have different strengths, but try it out. If you like it, do it that way. I've heard people say that this might be a better way of doing it because it allows you to get to like a D chord quicker. This note here is common between a D chord. However, if we examine the way that we move to a D chord from the other A chord and the other similar examples, it doesn't actually become any easier using this shape. And here's an important thing to keep in mind. If we're trying to find shortcuts, trying to look for the easiest possible way, we want to do A like this because that's going to let us play D quicker. If we're going forward with that mindset, we're actually going to cause problems for ourselves because we'll always be trying to find the path of least resistance, the easiest hack, and that's not how we want to go about learning guitar. And what you'll find is as you progress, as you develop the fluency on the instrument, you'll build the muscle memory. The fact that maybe it's a little quicker to go from this shape to this shape instead of this shape to this shape, it's not, but maybe that's what you're thinking. You'll develop the muscle memory and the strength and the fluency to move super quick between those shapes anyway. So don't ever try and find shortcuts because you think it's easier right now. We want to make sure we're doing things properly because in the long term, that's going to result in us being a lot more proficient on the instrument. I don't actually play either of those ways. Most of the time, if I'm playing A, I just use 1 finger, which doesn't allow me to hit the high E string, but that doesn't matter. Earlier we talked about how a chord is actually just a collection of 3 or more notes. The 3 notes that make up an A chord are A, C sharp, and E. Here we've got A, E. Here we've got A, E, A again, and C sharp. Those are the 3 notes. I don't need that extra high E. So I often just play A with 1 finger because it's a lot easier to do and it also becomes a movable shape that we can use later. However, I don't teach students it that way first. I think it's far better for our development on the instrument to begin with this shape, because that gets us used to having to navigate problematic shapes sometimes. We've got to squash these fingers in. We're already breaking our rule about fretting position, but that's okay. We're compensating for it here. And this is the shape I use as well if I do want to hear that note. Because this here does sound different to that there. Slightly different flavors of the A chord. So being able to do both gives us options. When we're learning new chords, sometimes it can be tricky to remember which fingers go where. So here's another useful memory hook so you don't forget that this is the A chord. All right, stay with me here. When we play this A chord, we have all our fingers stacked right on top of each other in a line. That kind of looks like a number 1. A is also the first letter of the alphabet. So keep that in mind when you're playing the A chord. We want our fingers arranged like a number 1, which forms the A chord because it's the first letter of the alphabet. The more little memory hooks we can find like this when we're coming across a new concept, the better we'll be able to remember it. Hey guys, thanks for checking out the lesson. This one is part of a series of lessons that I produced while working on the content for our new beginner guitar course. If you're starting out on guitar, head along to guitarnutrition.com and check that out. And if you want a free Zoom lesson, go over to the website, guitarnutrition.com, and sign up for the newsletter.